The landing bay shimmered under the midday sun as the Galactic Union delegation descended from their sleek silver ship. Ambassador Vrixel adjusted his ceremonial robes nervously, his antennae twitching with every new sound. Beside him, the military attaché Zernok flicked his eyes over the human structures sprawled across the plains. Squat buildings made of gray concrete, defensive walls lined with barbed wire, heavy vehicles parked haphazardly like a scene after a minor catastrophe. This was Earth's so-called military command center, and it was utterly unlike anything Vrixel had expected. A group of human soldiers stood stiffly in formation waiting for them. Their faces were stern but their eyes sharp, calculating. General Harding, a tall man with silver hair and a crisp uniform, stepped forward with a practiced salute. "Welcome to Fort Bastion," he said, his voice rough like gravel but polite enough. Vrixel raised a trembling hand in greeting, fighting the urge to shield himself from the cacophony already rolling across the base. In the distance, explosions sounded like distant thunder, and somewhere out of sight, human voices barked orders, mingled with what sounded like laughter. Zernok leaned close, speaking low in the ambassador's ear. "This is their primary military installation. It appears disorganized." Vrixel clicked his mandibles quietly in agreement, but forced a diplomatic smile. "Humans have their methods," he replied cautiously. He hoped that was true. They were escorted down a path worn smooth by heavy boots and tank treads. Dust kicked up around their feet, causing Vrixel to cough politely into a scented cloth. The humans didn't seem to notice. They marched confidently, almost casually, as though the presence of alien dignitaries was merely another routine part of their day. A rumble passed through the ground beneath them, and Vrixel glanced nervously toward a distant hill where dark smoke began to rise. "Live fire exercises," Harding explained, reading the question on Vrixel's face. "Standard operating procedure." Another explosion shook the air, and a trio of heavily armored vehicles rumbled past, spraying mud from their massive tires. Vrixel and Zernok dodged back, nearly colliding with a group of jogging soldiers who passed by, shouting some kind of chant in rhythm. None of them slowed down or even seemed surprised by the aliens' presence. Inside the main operations tent, the walls were lined with screens showing a dizzying array of battlefield data. Humans, some in uniform, others in civilian attire, monitored the screens, speaking rapidly into headsets. The air smelled of coffee, sweat, and something acrid Vrixel couldn't identify. "We're about to begin a demonstration," Harding announced, gesturing toward a massive viewing window that looked out onto a sprawling open field. Vrixel nodded, though he wasn't sure he wanted to see what humans considered a demonstration. Zernok was already tapping furiously on his datapad, recording everything. Outside, rows of human soldiers formed up into uneven lines. Tanks rolled into position, their turrets swinging lazily side to side. Aircraft buzzed overhead, weaving unpredictably through the sky. Vrixel noted the lack of uniformity with growing alarm. In the Galactic Union military, such lack of synchronization would have been unthinkable. Troops moved like clockwork, every step calculated. Here on Earth, it seemed as though chaos ruled. A siren wailed, and the drills began. Immediately, the field was a maelstrom of noise and movement. Soldiers sprinted in different directions, some diving behind cover, others charging forward with reckless energy. Tanks advanced but veered unpredictably, splitting into separate groups. Aircraft swooped down dangerously close to the ground, scattering enemy targets painted in bright red. Vrixel watched, antennae drooping lower with every passing second. Surely this was a disaster unfolding in real time? Surely the humans had lost control. But no, the human officers in the operations tent watched with calm, measured expressions. Some even smiled slightly. "Adaptability," one of them said to no one in particular. "That's what wins wars." Vrixel stared, unable to comprehend. This was not a demonstration of discipline. It was an exhibition of controlled madness. A heavy boom sounded as a mock missile hit a target bunker, sending up a plume of dirt and debris. Cheers erupted from the soldiers. Vrixel flinched instinctively. Zernok whispered, "I cannot predict their tactics. Their behavior violates every principle of organized warfare." Vrixel agreed but kept his face neutral. He had a sinking feeling that the unpredictability they were witnessing was not a flaw. It was a feature. General Harding turned to them, a thin smile on his face. "Enjoying the show?" he asked. Vrixel forced a polite nod, even as another chaotic wave of shouting soldiers and roaring vehicles tore across the field. The ambassador wondered what other surprises Earth had waiting for them. Quietly, he made a mental note: never, under any circumstance, provoke these humans into real war. The debriefing room was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just witnessed. Cool, clean air circulated softly through hidden vents, and the walls were lined with photographs of human military history, grainy images of battles fought on land, sea, and air. Vrixel and Zernok sat stiffly in chairs that were clearly designed for human anatomy, their smaller forms almost swallowed by the deep cushions. General Harding entered behind them, accompanied by a few aides carrying tablets and folders. The humans' casual demeanor was disorienting. After what they had just seen, Vrixel had expected heated discussions, reports of failures, frantic plans to correct mistakes. Instead, Harding took a seat at the head of the table, crossed one leg over the other, and gave them a knowing smile. "So," he said, his voice low but confident, "any questions about our training methods?" Vrixel exchanged a glance with Zernok, who shifted uncomfortably. The ambassador cleared his throat, the translator device clipped to his collar humming slightly. "We observed a distinct lack of centralized control during your exercises. This is atypical of what we recognize as standard military doctrine." Harding chuckled, not unkindly. "Yeah, that's kinda the point." He tapped a button, and the wall behind him lit up with a series of graphs and diagrams. "See, you folks from the Union come from a long tradition of discipline, right? Everyone moves together, follows orders to the letter. It's elegant, precise, predictable." Vrixel bristled slightly at the last word, but Harding continued without pause. "Humans learned early that wars don't care about elegance. Chaos is the natural state of combat. The side that adapts fastest wins. That's why we train for improvisation. Controlled chaos." He leaned back as if that explained everything. Vrixel struggled to process the concept. In Galactic Union academies, adaptability was taught within strict parameters. Deviations were analyzed, catalogued, corrected. Here on Earth, it seemed deviation was celebrated. Zernok tapped furiously at his datapad again, his mandibles twitching in frustration. "But how do you ensure discipline?" Zernok asked bluntly. "Surely in a crisis, this improvisation leads to collapse?" Harding smiled wider, and Vrixel recognized a particular gleam in the general's eyes. Pride. "We don't collapse. We evolve. You see, every human soldier is trained not just to obey orders but to understand why they're given. They're encouraged to think, to question when needed. Initiative saves lives. A private on the ground can make a call that saves 100 soldiers if he understands the broader goal. Top-down control can kill you when the unexpected happens." A map appeared on the screen now, showing a simulated battlefield. Points of engagement flashed in erratic patterns, no straight lines or elegant formations, just small groups moving like living currents through terrain. Vrixel found it almost painful to watch. It was a simulation of disorder, yet, according to the statistics scrolling alongside it, this disorder consistently outperformed traditional strategies by significant margins. "We don't just drill formations," Harding said. "We drill decision-making, problem-solving under fire, reacting faster than the enemy can plan." He paused, letting the words settle. "In short, we weaponize chaos." Vrixel stared at the screen, the implications swirling in his mind. If what Harding claimed was true, the humans weren't merely a threat because of their numbers or technology. Their true danger lay in their mindset. No predictable tactics, no exploitable patterns, no hesitation when the plan fell apart. Just raw, adaptable willpower. Zernok leaned close to Vrixel, whispering urgently, "This doctrine is dangerous. Uncontainable. It defies our predictive models entirely." Vrixel nodded subtly, already formulating how he would phrase this discovery in his next report to the Union High Council. Harding stood and clapped his hands together once. "Come on. I'll show you the war games next. You'll get to see this in action on a larger scale." As they followed him out, Vrixel noticed a mural painted along one wall. It showed human soldiers standing amid smoke and ruin, faces grim but unbroken, with a single phrase scrawled beneath them in crude, bold letters: "Improvise." adapt, overcome. The words sent a chill through Vrixel's veins. He could see now how humanity had survived so many of their own self-inflicted disasters, how they had clawed their way from a primitive species on a minor planet to a force that even the Galactic Union hesitated to engage. They had not perfected order. They had mastered survival in chaos. As they stepped outside into the sunlight, the rumble of distant artillery filled the air once more. Soldiers sprinted across fields, helicopters dipped low over the trees, and armored vehicles tore paths through rugged terrain. No formations. No symmetry. Just raw, relentless motion. Humans did not fear chaos. They were born in it, and they had learned to make it their greatest weapon. Vrixel pulled his cloak tighter against a breeze that seemed to carry the echoes of distant battles where neat ranks and perfect plans had crumbled before the storm of human ingenuity. Quietly, deep within his chest, he felt a new sensation stirring. It was not hatred. It was not disdain. It was something far more dangerous. It was fear. The observation platform hovered silently above the military training grounds, a sleek disk suspended by anti-gravity engines. From this vantage point, Vrixel and Zernok could see the full scale of the human war games unfolding below. It was unlike anything they had prepared themselves for. Where they expected clear lines of engagement and organized maneuvers, there was only confusion to their eyes. Scattered units moving independently, smoke obscuring the landscape, rapid-fire bursts of communication on open channels, each soldier adapting on the fly. No two squads seemed to be doing the same thing, yet somehow they all advanced their objectives with ruthless efficiency. General Harding stood at the edge of the platform with his hands clasped behind his back, calmly observing the chaos he had unleashed. Vrixel approached cautiously, still struggling to mask his unease. "Tell me, Ambassador," Harding said without turning, "how would your forces respond to an attack like this?" Vrixel hesitated. If he were honest, the Union would be paralyzed by the unpredictability. Their algorithms, their strategies, all relied on discernible patterns. Here there were none. "We would struggle," Vrixel admitted finally, his voice low. Harding smiled at the horizon, as if expecting that answer. "Good. Because war isn't about who has the best plan. It's about who adapts fastest when that plan falls apart." Below them, a small human squad darted into a ruined building as an armored convoy rolled by. Instead of engaging directly, the soldiers planted electronic devices on the passing vehicles. Seconds later, the convoy shuddered and ground to a halt, its systems jammed. Within moments, the humans had neutralized a superior force without a single direct confrontation. Zernok muttered something under his breath in his native tongue, a curse Vrixel was sure he wasn't meant to hear. Harding turned to face them now, his expression hardening. "You're wondering why we fight like this, why we don't do things your way. It's because your way assumes the enemy will play fair, that they'll follow the same rules. Humans learned long ago that the universe doesn't care about rules. It cares about survival." He gestured towards the battlefield. "Our soldiers are taught to think like predators, like survivors. If the terrain changes, they adapt. If the enemy adapts, they evolve faster. No fixed formations, no rigid chains of command. Just a goal, and the freedom to achieve it however they can." Vrixel felt a creeping admiration mix with his fear. It was one thing to know about humanity's history from records. It was another thing entirely to witness it unfolding live. There was a primal honesty to their methods, an instinctive understanding of conflict that went beyond strategy. It was not art. It was survival, pure and brutal. A new group of human soldiers entered the simulation zone, this time wearing exoskeleton suits that enhanced their speed and strength. They moved in unpredictable bursts, using cover creatively, their communication limited to quick hand signals and barely audible clicks over the radio. Watching them was like observing a pack of wild predators, each movement purposeful, every action taken without waiting for higher authorization. Zernok broke the silence, his voice tight. "This is dangerous. Even your own allies cannot predict what your forces will do next. How can you maintain alliances if you cannot guarantee order?" Harding shrugged. "Trust. Shared objectives. A lot of yelling sometimes. But mostly, it's because we all know that in the worst moments, we'd rather have someone who can think and act than someone waiting for orders that'll never come." The humans below reached another objective point, this one heavily fortified. Instead of charging head-on, they feigned a retreat, drawing defenders out of position, then circling back to exploit the weakness. It was ugly. It was messy. It was devastatingly effective. Vrixel clenched his jaw. Every instinct trained into him screamed that this was wrong, inefficient, dangerous. And yet, the results were undeniable. The humans weren't winning by playing the game better. They were winning by refusing to play the expected game at all. A low rumble echoed through the air as distant explosions shook the ground. Smoke curled upward in thick plumes, and the simulated battlefield began to shift, new obstacles appearing as part of the evolving exercise. Harding observed calmly as his troops immediately adjusted, rerouting their movements without waiting for new commands. Vrixel realized then that the humans had trained not just for battle but for change itself. Change was not their enemy. It was their element. Harding turned back to them, his face serious now. You came here expecting to catalog our weaknesses. To reassure yourselves that you could handle us if necessary. What you need to understand is that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's not even our soldiers. It's our refusal to give up when the universe changes the rules. It's the fact that we expect chaos. And we're damn good at thriving in it. Vrixel swallowed hard. He had no rebuttal. There was no logical argument to counter what he had just seen. Humanity didn't need to be the strongest or the most advanced to be the most dangerous. They only needed to be the most determined. As the drill ended and the soldiers regrouped, laughing and exchanging handshakes, Vrixel realized with a sinking heart that he would have to revise his entire report to the Union High Council. The threat humanity posed was not just in their military might. It was in their indomitable spirit. And if ever conflict did come, Vrixel feared that no amount of preparation would ever be enough. The debriefing room was stark and quiet, a sharp contrast to the explosive energy of the battlefield outside. Vrixel sat stiffly in his chair, his mind still reeling from what he had witnessed. Around him, the human officers gathered casually, some sipping coffee, others laughing quietly among themselves. General Harding leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed, waiting for everyone to settle. Zernok sat beside Vrixel, tapping his claws against the metal surface, a nervous rhythm that betrayed his own unsettled state. Finally, Harding spoke. "All right, let's hear it. What did you think?" His tone was almost teasing, as if he already knew the answer. Vrixel shifted uncomfortably, choosing his words with care. "Your tactics are effective, undeniably so. But they are chaotic, unpredictable. There is no cohesion." Harding chuckled, shaking his head. "There's cohesion, Ambassador. It's just not the kind you're used to. Our troops are trained to work together without needing constant oversight. They trust each other. They trust themselves. That's what keeps them cohesive, not some top-down command." Vrixel glanced at Zernok, who gave him a barely perceptible nod, urging him to continue. "But how can you ensure control in larger conflicts? Surely at scale, this chaos would spiral out of control." One of the human officers, a grizzled veteran with scars tracing his jawline, spoke up. "You don't control it. You guide it. You trust the training, the instincts. You give the troops a clear goal and the tools they need to get there. You trust that they'll make the right calls when things go sideways." Vrixel frowned. Trust was a fragile thing in his culture. Systems were built on strict orders, protocols, predictability. Trust was secondary to obedience. Yet here, trust was the foundation. Harding pushed off from the table and began pacing slowly. "The first time we fought off-world, we tried to bring our old Earth tactics with us. Neat lines, strict orders, the whole shebang. Got us nearly wiped out. The enemy didn't play fair. They didn't stay in formation. They adapted. And we had to adapt faster." He stopped in front of Vrixel, looking down at him with an almost predatory intensity. "You think our drills are chaotic? You should see us when we're fighting for real." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of Harding's words settling over them. Vrixel's throat felt dry. He understood now why so many species feared humanity without fully comprehending them. It wasn't their weapons or numbers. It was this raw, relentless determination to survive and win, no matter the cost. Zernok shifted in his seat. "We observed, multiple instances where soldiers acted independently, deviating from the planned course. Is that not a risk? Harding smiled thinly. It's a risk, sure. But so is standing still while you wait for new orders and the enemy shoots you dead. I'd rather have soldiers who take initiative and make a few mistakes than soldiers who die doing nothing. Another officer, a younger woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Initiative is why we win. Because when plans fail, and they always do, our people already know how to pick themselves up and keep fighting. On the holoscreen behind Harding, footage replayed highlights from the drill. Units improvising with limited resources, leaders emerging organically within small groups, unconventional tactics that turned apparent defeats into victories. To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. But to humans, it was controlled chaos. Purposeful, flexible, alive. Vrixel swallowed his pride. You train your soldiers to disobey. It was not a question. Harding laughed out loud. No, Ambassador. We train them to think. Big difference. He tapped his temple with one finger. A good soldier follows orders. A great soldier knows when orders don't make sense anymore. The door to the debriefing room slid open, and a young private entered, saluting sharply before delivering a data pad to Harding. The general glanced at it, nodded, then tossed it lightly onto the table. Debrief reports. Casualty rates. Success rates. You'll see that even with the chaos, our efficiency is higher than most of your union's best simulations. Vrixel stared at the pad but made no move to pick it up. He didn't need to see the numbers. The results were obvious. In this theater of war, traditional methods would crumble. Against humans, adaptability was the only currency that mattered. Zernok finally spoke again, voice low and cautious. You intend for this demonstration to serve as a deterrent. Harding's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Exactly. We don't want a war. But if it comes to us, we want every species out there to know exactly what they be up against. He folded his arms again, his posture relaxed but somehow more threatening than any weapon. We are not the biggest empire. We are not the oldest. We are not the most numerous. But when it comes down to it, we are the ones who will outlast you. Outfight you. Outsurvive you. Vrixel stood slowly, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders. He looked around the room one last time at these humans, laughing, chatting, completely unbothered by the immense destruction they could unleash if necessary. There was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to contest. He inclined his head respectfully. Message received, General. Harding grinned. Good. Then maybe we can keep things peaceful after all. As Vrixel and Zernok left the debriefing room, the sounds of human laughter followed them down the corridor, a reminder that even in the face of chaos and war, humanity remained unbroken. And that, Vrixel realized with a shudder, was their true power. The delegation shuttle cruised silently through the atmosphere, heading back toward the Union's flagship in orbit. Inside the cabin, Vrixel sat rigidly, his mind a whirlwind of conflicted thoughts. Across from him, Zernok stared out the viewport, watching the clouds pass below with an unreadable expression. Neither spoke for a long while, the weight of what they had seen during the human military drill still heavy in the air. Vrixel replayed the day's events over and over, each time arriving at the same unsettling conclusion. The humans were unlike anything the galaxy had prepared him for. Their technology was impressive but not extraordinary. Their numbers were manageable. Their physical capabilities were within expectation. It was their spirit, their reckless, stubborn, unbreakable spirit, that made them terrifying. Zernok finally turned, breaking the silence. The Council will demand an immediate report. His voice was low, tight with tension. Vrixel nodded slowly. We must recommend a change in strategy. The standard approaches will not work. Containment, intimidation, even economic sanctions, they would only provoke them further. Zernok's mandibles clicked in agreement. We underestimated them. Gravely. As the shuttle pierced the upper atmosphere, the stars began to emerge, dotting the endless blackness. Vrixel found himself staring at Earth, the vibrant blue planet shrinking behind them. How could such a seemingly small world produce beings so utterly disruptive to the galactic order? He leaned forward, speaking carefully. We must advocate for integration. Friendship, not domination. If we try to force humanity into compliance, we will fail. Worse, we will create an enemy capable of dismantling us piece by piece. Zernok was quiet for a moment, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. It will not be an easy sell. Many among the Union see humanity as a primitive anomaly, a child species to be corrected. Vrixel allowed himself a small, grim smile. Those who persist in that belief will not survive the first engagement. The shuttle docked smoothly with the flagship, magnetic clamps locking it into place with a deep metallic thunk. As the hatch opened, a trio of Union security officers stood waiting, their faces tense. News of the humans' chaotic drills must have already circulated. Vrixel straightened his tunic and stepped forward, nodding respectfully. "Take us to the council chamber immediately." The walk through the ship's corridors was brisk and silent, save for the low hum of machinery. As they moved, crew members glanced at them nervously, whispers trailing in their wake. Fear had already taken root. That was dangerous. Fear could push leaders into rash decisions. Vrixel's mind raced, crafting his report, choosing his words carefully. They had to understand the truth without panicking. They had to see humanity not as a threat to crush, but as a force to respect, and if possible, to stand beside. The council chamber doors slid open, revealing a half-circle of high-backed chairs occupied by the Union's most powerful figures. Their gazes pinned Vrixel and Zernok the moment they entered. High Chancellor Vren, an ancient being with silvered scales and piercing golden eyes, leaned forward slightly. "Ambassadors, we await your findings." Vrixel stepped into the center of the room, feeling the weight of countless expectations pressing down on him. He began to speak, voice steady. He detailed the drills they had witnessed, the seeming chaos, the wild adaptability, the brutal effectiveness of human tactics. He spoke of the soldiers who acted independently yet moved as one, bound by unspoken trust and resilience. He described the human leadership, their philosophy of guided chaos, their emphasis on individual initiative. The council listened in stony silence, some faces hardening with disbelief, others shifting with growing alarm. When he finished, there was a long pause before Vren spoke again. "You suggest we should... what?" "Bow to them." There was a sharp edge of derision in the Chancellor's voice. Vrixel met his gaze without flinching. "I suggest we respect them. Attempt to ally with them. Guide them where we can. They do not seek war, but if provoked, they will not lose. They will not stop." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. One counselor, a hulking creature from the Drachther systems, sneered. "They are primitives. Barely spacefaring. How could they hope to stand against the combined might of the Union?" Vrixel turned slowly to face him. "Because when plans fail, when leaders fall, when systems crumble, the humans will still be standing. They are chaos incarnate. And chaos, when harnessed, is unstoppable." The room fell into uneasy silence once more. Vrixel pressed on. "They view survival not as a goal, but as an expectation. They view hardship not as a deterrent, but as a challenge to be overcome. They do not fear death. They do not fear failure. They embrace it, learn from it, and grow stronger." Zernok stepped forward to add his voice. "If we seek to dominate them, we will face an enemy unlike any in our history. But if we embrace them, if we show them respect, we may find an ally more valuable than any we have ever known." The Chancellor sat back in his chair, contemplative now, the fire of pride giving way to the cold logic of survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "We will consider your counsel." As Vrixel and Zernok turned to leave, a final thought burned in Vrixel's mind. The galaxy had seen many empires rise and fall, many species come and go. But humanity was different. They were not merely another chapter in galactic history. They were a new force altogether, one that could not be tamed, only invited to walk beside those wise enough to offer a hand instead of a sword. As the chamber doors closed behind them, Vrixel realized that today was not the day the Union decided humanity's fate. It was the day the Union decided whether it would survive the coming storm, or be swept away by it.